Well, Jack, baby, don't say no. I mean, after all, you did participate in the assassination of the president.
Instead of throwing Oswald in the car that was already sitting there ready to go and rushing him to the hospital, they dragged him back into the jail office. They called for an ambulance, which showed up 6 or 7 minutes later.
Parkland furnishes the city with this intern on Saturdays and Sundays, and that's part of his training. And so we knew he was there. He was only 40, 50 feet away, and he was summoned over there, and he did a quick examination and started some kind of respiratory work on him.
Now, anyone with any sense, any knowledge of medicine knows that when somebody's gut shot or bleeding internally, you don't pump up and down on it. Oswald gave out with a moan and just kind of collapsed, and Oswald was dead before he ever even got to the hospital.
Lee Harvey Oswald killed no one at all. So the point is, it wasn't a question of being alone or with anybody. He had nothing to do with the assassination. To answer it more fully, one of the functions of the Warren Commission was to conceal the fact that Lee Oswald was not involved, was conceal the fact that he was not involved in any way, and to make it appear as if he were involved. And they've been very successful so far in that objective.
This is a sad time for all people. We have suffered a loss that cannot be weighed. For me, it is a deep personal tragedy. I know that the world shares the sorrow that Mrs. Kennedy and her family bear.
Down this avenue of sadness, they bring President John F. Kennedy, martyred hero, to lie in state under the great dome of the Capitol. Mrs. Kennedy comes forward with Caroline in a tableau that calls for no words. Its poignancy calls only for tears.
President John F. Kennedy died on November 22nd, 1963. So did his foreign policy.
President Johnson represents a sorrowing people.
They had Johnson there, too, his successor to be, in the situation where he had to hear the gunfire, and he heard the gunfire. And that is apparent by the fact that he changed the foreign policy of the United States in regard to Asia within 72 hours. As a matter of fact, he changed it on the following Sunday. After the eulogy, after attending the eulogy in Washington, he met with the chiefs of staff, and in effect his message was, tell them in Vietnam that everything's changed, 180 degrees. We're going to back them all the way.
An eternal flame is lighted before the grave by Mrs. Kennedy, the first such memorial to burn in Arlington Cemetery. She is followed by the president's brothers, Robert and Edward.
Bobby was so devastated by his brother's death that he kind of took a view, what difference does anything make? He's dead.
With the death of Oswald, questions about a conspiracy to kill Kennedy were accelerating. Congress was demanding an investigation that was curtailed by a memorandum from then Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach to the White House suggesting a presidential commission. A separate investigation in the state of Texas was also stopped by this memorandum, which said in part
that the public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin. It's before the first witness was questioned. There was no investigation. But the public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin. He doesn't even say that Oswald was, just that the public has to be satisfied that he did not have Confederates who are still at large.
Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach felt Texas was definitely not the place to be conducting an investigation.
Another investigation in Texas, which I thought was a terrible idea, because I had absolutely no confidence that the Attorney General would have the cooperation that one had to have. He didn't have the resources of the Bureau, of the CIA. And I also thought, with Lyndon Johnson coming from Texas, that that was the worst possible person to investigate. Everybody would think that was totally under Lyndon Johnson's control.
Katzenbach was also concerned that some elements might think President Johnson had Kennedy killed. Fletcher Prouty said he saw a personal memo of J. Edgar Hoover's which answered to Prouty's satisfaction the question of whether or not Johnson was involved.
Hoover had lived across the street from Johnson for 19 years here in Washington. They were old buddies. They borrowed each other's lawnmower. You know, they were old friends. They weren't just president and head of the FBI. Johnson said, "You're sure you have the man that did it?" He said, "Oh, yes." He said, "Oswald." He was up there in he said, 5th floor of the building. He missed by a floor, but we'll give him credit for that. And then Johnson said, "Were any of them fired at me?" I think that clears up the question of whether Johnson was involved. If he thought they were shooting at him, he didn't hire the gunner.
You always had the fear that the